Hello, and I'm delighted to be joined today by the fabulous Tom Nash, Mr. Divorce Coach. You can't, there's no better introduction than that. The yellow chair.
Yellow chair.
So, Tom is an internationally certified coach specialising in divorce, separation, and family coaching. He is a child of divorce, a divorcee himself, a father, stepfather, and successful co-parent of his own blended family. And some of those things that we're going to have a chat a bit more about today. But just to let you know that Tom works with men, women, and couples in his practice, assisting their emotional well-being, positive mindset, and practical support through clients' separation and divorce. And it is so good to hear that you work with men and women as well as couples, because I think so many people kind of just work with one gender. You miss out on so much, I feel.
You do. I mean, that was one of the very first questions I always get asked by other partners, like lawyers, mediators, etc. Is, so do you only work with guys? No, not at all. It was the brand for Mr. Divorce Coach was an accident, and in all honesty, as was the logo. But it was just to differentiate, because I was at the time the only guy doing it, and want more men to come and do this as well. I think it's really got to change to help others. But yeah, no, I work with men, women, couples. And it kind of goes sometimes there's a bit of a bias, and a lot of the client base is male orientated, but at the moment, as of this very moment and this date, the vast majority of my clients are female, because again, everybody likes to work with different people for different reasons, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so much in it that's personality driven, and you need to click with that person that you're working with, I think, especially in the type of work that you're doing, when we're kind of digging deep into the emotional side of what all this brings up for us. It's got to help that you get on with a person. Where do people find you?
Everywhere. All over the place. So Instagram, less so Facebook. I don't really do much on Facebook, but predominantly my clients either come from, if it's online, it's usually kind of an Instagram or LinkedIn, or from the podcast and YouTube. But again, the vast majority of referrals come from sort of family lawyers, mediators, financial planners, etc., other areas of support for people going through divorce or separation. Or now that I'm a few years in, I'm actually starting to get more of the referrals from past clients as well, which is, I think, just a natural progression, isn't it, as you grow your business and your practice.
Yeah, definitely. And you do sometimes hear of family lawyers having repeat business, but we want to stay away from that if we possibly can. So in the introduction, we were mentioning that you've had quite a lot of personal experience in divorce, and one of the things that we haven't really got to grips with on the Smart Divorce podcast is co-parenting and blended families. And I know that's personal experience that you've got, as well as I'm sure through your coaching as well. I'd love to start off with talking about co-parenting, because this can be a really tricky topic, can't it?
Absolutely, yeah. There's just so much going on for everybody, and it's a lot of the work is having to help rebuild new forms of trust, new ways of communicating, boundaries and structures around that positively impact the situation, and utilizing the skills and tools around them, whether it be technical or non-technical related, as well as how they're really how they want that situation to be, and how they want it to pan out, whilst you also might be dealing with, and quite typically if I'm working with a couple, you may find that obviously where there's one party that's predominantly made the decision, or this is a decision that's been led by one party, a lot of the time you're dealing with very different experiences, polar opposites, and trying to help them work towards that greater good, as it were, whilst working with very different experiences for each of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I work with couples very occasionally in the work that I do, and I have to say that I take my hat off to you, because I think it's some of the most difficult work that we do. So I suppose if we start, maybe not quite at the beginning, but kind of near the beginning, How soon should, because we hear talk of parenting plans, and I'm not sure that if everybody who talks about them knows what they are or understands what their purpose is. So should we start with that, with what is a parenting plan? What does it do? What does it include?
Okay, so a parenting plan very simply is helping you to build a structure and a basis on which you can work to essentially put the children's needs front and center, whilst also creating your own version of balance. One of the phrases I hear all the time that I'm sure many other people do is about 50-50. For me, co-parenting is about 100-100, and it's helping you build something that's uniquely tailored to each of your scenarios and your situations. So where the children are on which days, school pickups, drop-offs, everything through to do they have an equal set of school uniforms, so on and so forth. So you can kind of try and refrain from creating a suitcase kid, as it were. But even through to how you're going to communicate with one another about the bigger immediate, maybe emergency things, little Timmy's fallen over at school and bumped his head, through to future situations, birthdays, Christmases, holidays, so on and so forth. The real key word, though, to it about your parenting plan is about the uniqueness of it. So again, there are, in many instances, there's a need for and a benefit for mirroring certain house rules, per se, in the two homes. That might be things like, let's say, bedtimes. However, there's also sometimes a uniqueness to each individual situation about where that might not be pertinent. So as an example, I had a particular couple I was working with where one of the parents, parent A, was saying, well, at parent B's house, they must have the same bedtime. Well, parent B lived a 5-minute walk from the school. Parent A lived over a 30-minute drive away. So actually there's a bit of a disparity in terms of what time the kids need to get up, have breakfast, brush their teeth, so on and so forth, and leave for school. So actually there's maybe a need to adapt things like the bedtime. So, but the key thing about with a parenting plan is helping you to both build a structure to and a baseline to work from, but also looking at where there needs to be future adaptations as the children get older, work situations changed. The pandemic was a huge thing that helped, that one helped, but also didn't help a lot of parents and co-parents, where all of a sudden that other parent that maybe didn't do the school run is now available. So again, it's also looking for opportunity for involvement and change. But like I say, it's about helping you build a core structure and a basis to work from in terms of how you can set out that plan, how you can adapt it, how it evolves, what the children's needs are.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the most important things that to me that you said during that was about it being adaptable as the children's needs get older. I mean, my children were, let me think, 11, 12, when I got divorced, and they're now 17 and 18. Their needs now compared with their needs when they were kind of towards the end of primary school were dramatically different from both of us, and in terms of the support they needed, and in terms of kind of where they're going to be. You know, if I told my kids where they were going to be now, their response would not be favorable.
No, I've got a 16-year-old, so yeah, I definitely know what that's like. But I think it's even about involvement for the parents. And again, I always use my own experience rather than using clients' ones. When myself and my ex-wife were married, I worked in the city. I left at 6:30 in the morning. I got home at best 7, usually 8 o'clock at night. So my ex-wife did do the school runs and etc. When shortly after, well, about a year or two after we were divorced and separated, and I started Mr. Divorce Coach, completing my coaching training, etc. That changed. I now work for myself. I can be adaptable, and actually, it wasn't about like making these big changes. But actually, it is now also how that could be as a support resource and mechanism for my ex-wife. Actually, how could that be a benefit that supports her? Because if she wanted to work more, or she wanted to do whatever it was with her time, that now actually I can be an additional resource and additional support. And that kind of involvement that you're talking about, and adaptation as well, is whilst no, I didn't previously always take the children to school. Well, what it once was isn't necessarily what it will always be. And again, it was talking about the kids' needs. Actually, the boys wanted me to take them to school a couple of days a week, but they also still wanted mummy to take them to school a couple of days a week. So it's about, right, so how do we work this that puts them front and center rather than in the middle? And actually, how does it also work for both of us where we can support one another?
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's one of the things that I really admire about your account and your social media, is that it's really clear that that your family is all the kids and all the parents. It's not just, this is our bit and this is their bit, and then there's some kids that come in and out. It's kind of a big thing. Everybody's needs are tried to be considered. And I really, I'm not naive. I know that social media puts all up the best side of things, and I'm sure there are times when you're, where there's crosswords, but I think you quite clearly, it's really important to you that the kids are front and center, and that it's a team effort. That must have taken some work to achieve.
That's one word for it. Yeah.
Are you not going to assume that it's just like actually falling into place?
No. And I think that's one of the things that I tried to get across quite a lot is, again, as I just mentioned about what it always wants isn't necessarily what it will always be. So I've had people before, clients, lawyers, etc., friends, whatever, even family, that have said about, well, it's all right for you guys because you all get on, you have your family, we have a parent WhatsApp chat that none of the kids are in, etc. And everyone goes that, and everyone says, oh, that's great because you guys all get on. Well, we do now, but we didn't always, right? I'd filled out the C100s. We'd been through failed attempts at mediation in my hands. We argued with them, or disputed with them, the barrister about which day's here and who has the passports and all that sort of stuff. Really, really challenging. Those emails or text messages that we send off to one another where we're pretending to be a lawyer without prejudice, dear full name, rather than, hey, how you doing, by the way, XYZ. But so we've been through that, and again, that what it was not always be, sentence I keep saying about, but it does take effort. So I run my coaching practice on 3 core values, which is understand, evolve, and improve. Everybody wants the improvement piece. Everybody wants the end outcome and product. I want it to be better. Okay. Yeah. The bit that I help them with is the other stage, the improved bit they can do themselves. First of all, that working it back, if what they're doing at the moment isn't working, the old saying of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, if it is broke, you need to fix it. So that requires evolvement. It needs change. It needs a different approach, a different way of doing things. But to do that, you still need to work back and understand what didn't work in the first place. And actually what resources, whether that be people, technology, whatever it might be, what do you need to understand actually where were the issues before, so how do we not make those same mistakes? How do we work better with each other? But it does require that change. And someone pointed out to me recently, I was having the same conversation, a similar conversation, and I said it did take all 4 of us, because I think, as you know, my ex-wife's boyfriend is my girlfriend's ex-husband, so the parents have effectively swapped round. So we had to find a way for it to work. We had to find a better way. Otherwise, that could be really, really challenging for all the kids being caught in the middle where you've got the alternate set of parents. And like I say, it does take effort from everybody. So it does need to be a contribution. That usually does need to start with someone or a group of starting to do something differently, approaching things differently, a consistency of olive branches, mending fences, whatever you want to call it, and creating at least an opportunity to do things differently, to do them better. Equally, it then still takes the other party to engage in that process as well. So there's got to be at some point a willingness and a motivation to say, do you know what, let's try this, and the other thing I always say to people is get through the awkwardness, because there's going to be some hard firsts. There's going to be some real challenging, weird, strange environments to be in if you want to get to that phase of co-parenting, where it's more co-friending in some respects. but it's about working through it, and not keep working from the past or positions of blame, etc. So it's about how do you positively move forward.
I think that's really interesting. And I think that, like you say, you know, this, oh, it's okay with you, for you, you know, as I say, we see the good stuff. You know, you clearly weren't posting pictures of when, you know, when things weren't going too well at the beginning, when you were trying to find your way. And what I think that is really useful to think about is, like, are you actually benefiting from the war that's happening at the moment? You know, if you're fighting with the other parent, is that doing you any good? Is that, like, does that feel nice? Does it sit well with you?
Yeah.
Or actually, if we can work through that anger and get through to the other side and be in a position like the one you're in, wouldn't that feel so much better? Yeah. You know, even if you're going to scrap the putting the kids front and center that we all love, even if you forget all about that and just think of yourself, surely it's better to be in a position where you've got a reasonable relationship with the other parent.
Absolutely. I mean, anyone that is currently or has previously been through this situation knows just how physically draining all of the emotional and the mindset and everything, all, I was about to swear then, but I was what I call the world's something game of chess, because you are thinking not just 2 or 3 but 47 moves down the road. If I do this, what's the repercussion? What are they going to say? Like, how are they going to come back at this? How is this going to be used against me? And that adversarial anticipation. But think of it from, like you just said, remove the kids for a moment, just think about yourself. But even from a self-care perspective, like, do you want to increase your sleep? Do you want to feel better about you? Do you want to have less stress in the workplace? I'm doing a thing at the moment with corporates and HR within organizations around creating a family transitions policy, because the impacts on the workplace are vastly more impactful than, let's say, the traditional grief cycle of loss of a loved one. When you lose someone and you go for that traditional grief cycle of loss, a loved one, a friend, family member, etc., the vast impacts are so much bigger in terms of the impact on the workplace and productivity, the impacts to not just the individual, your staff member, but their team as well, in terms of their productivity, sick days, so on and so forth. That actually it has a huge impact on every aspect of your life. So even if you think about it from a self-care perspective, how long do I want to carry this around for? How long do I want this to keep impacting my everyday life, that I even have to take a different route to go to Aldi's because I don't want to drive down the road that they're on or live near or anything like that? And I did that for months. I would stay out of a particular part of the town that I live in purely for fear of not wanting to run into someone. But I don't have to do that now. I can go straight to Aldi's and it's much easier.
That sounds much better. I think that I might have considered that, but my ex-husband moved about 400 yards away. So our local shop was the same local shop. The kids could walk to his house. But interestingly, you know, I think you don't have to be really good mates with the other person. You don't have to live in their pockets. You don't have to go out for beers with them or go out for dinner with them. But just being able to have that communication, just to be able to ask them to help you out when you're struggling, to be able to talk to them about issues that are affecting or impacting your kids. And I can give you a personal example of that. So our son's learning how to drive at the minute, and it's proving difficult for him. He's one of these kids that's never found anything hard. And he's doing, you know, he can drive fine, but he finds he collapses into a gelatinous heap whenever he gets into a driving exam. So he failed test 3, and I phoned my ex up and said, we're going to need to do something about this. He clearly needs more driving lessons. He's point blank refusing. And I was going to say between the two of us, no, I'm actually going to give him full credit. My ex managed to persuade Charlie to stand down, stop being an idiot, and have some more driving lessons so that he could learn. And if you've not got that relationship, you can't do that. And we're not at the point where we'd go out for a pint together or whatever, but to be able to be involved in our kids' lives so that things happen for the better because we can communicate, make the world a difference.
No, you're right. I mean, it doesn't, one of the things I always say to people is co-parent, especially if I have a couple come to me as well, I always say to them, don't just take my background because we get on. Co-parenting doesn't have to mean friends. Great if you want to, but you don't have to. I always think, I love words anyway, but I always think about the prefix of anything that's it's collaborative, it's cooperative, it's cohesive, it's working together to support that outcome. And for those people, like you say, they're in the center, and for each of you, it doesn't necessarily have to mean friends. So again, I always say to people think about and use the resources that are around you. So one, in terms of who else can you go and model? We all learn, just like you were saying with Charlie from his driving lessons. He's having driving lessons because he's modeling how to do something. Okay. So who do we surround ourselves with in terms of a support network, and who are we learning and modeling from? If you are surrounding yourself with friends, family members, colleagues, whatever it might be, who have had litigious, contentious, still highly challenging situations with their spouse over co-parenting, and then maybe the more in parallel parenting, for example, that's maybe not necessarily the positive support network to be around. Go and look at who else you know that actually has a more positive co-parenting relationship. How do they do it? Ask them the questions. What did you do? What do you happen when conflict arises, when you don't agree on something? How do you approach that? Go and ask these people, learn from other people how they do it, and find the way that uniquely suits you. Even down to things like, I did an episode recently about co-parenting tech. We live in a modern world. I mean, you were talking about the tech issues we've been having with emails and phones the last couple of days. But again, use what's there around you. So I actually wasn't working with both parties. I was only working with one. But I had a client a little while ago whose former spouse, soon to be at the time former spouse, was contacting them through about 10 different mediums. Email at work, personal email, mobile phone, phone in the office, WhatsApp, text, Snapchat, you name it. Homing pigeon, every kind of old school telegram,
flags,
directing them in like with a plane. So then it was about, okay, well, they didn't want to get into parallel parenting, they want to be co-parents, but they're definitely not going to be friends. So then it was about, okay, so how do we lessen the impact to you, parent A, to lessen that, and how do we centralize it using business terminology with them? Like, how do we centralize it and streamline it, make it more efficient? So what about a co-parenting app? I'm not going to mention the one because it's not about plugging them, but a particular one that I highly recommend.
On here, you can go back and listen to James's episode.
Go listen to James about Our Family Wizard. That just that one example of being able to have everything in terms of messaging with the tone meter and all like transfers, funds, like your co-parenting planning, everything's in this one space, alleviating the rest of your world, so that when you're sitting there at 9, 10 at night with your new partner or with the kids or whatever it might be, and your phone goes ping, it's WhatsApp, you don't go, don't even want to look at it because you're like, oh my God, who is it? What are they going to say? What now? Like, if it's all centralized here in this one area, it leaves the rest of your everyday modern life of emails, text, WhatsApp, Snapchat, etc., free to help lessen the anxieties and impacts to you. But also keeps it recorded and centralized. So even things like that is use the tools around you. How can you make it more efficient for all of you?
Yeah, it is that, isn't it? It absolutely is. It's just it makes the world a happier place for everybody, doesn't it? If this stuff all works. Something that struck me when you were talking about the people who are around you, and about kind of what you might learn from the people who are around you, and you might not want to answer this. So if you don't, that's absolutely fine, just let me know. But I know I'm a child of divorced parents as well, and I know that I learned how I didn't want my divorce to go, and how I didn't want my co-parents and my kids to go. I just wondered if you had an experience that was positive that you wanted to model from your parents, or totally the opposite.
Yeah.
More similar to mine.
My parents were awesome. I wouldn't change any of my upbringing for anything. It brought me to where I am now. But they did have a contentious experience. I'm not going to go into all of their bit too much. But that was that was one that, like you, I wanted to take lessons from how could I do it differently. And again, even that in itself is positive. And the other thing is, and I have to kind of give a bit of a caveat, and I suppose give them their dues, is I'm 39. So my parents are now late 60s, early 70s. That generation effectively were the first real generation of mass-produced divorce, separation, co-parenting. I mean, co-parenting, I grew up in a blended family, but in 1986, that wasn't a phrase. No one knew what that was. Yeah. And again, to give them their dues, they were modeling and learning from the people that were around them who hadn't been through that process. Yeah. So going back a generation or two, the viewpoint towards divorce and how society was then, and whether that be religious or societal impact, so on and so forth, all those things, it was, you split up, parents grow up, their children grow up with one parent, and again, typically with mum back then. I actually grew up with my dad. But it became very adversarial, and you weren't to be friends. You'd separate and divorce, you go separate ways, you try and annihilate each other, and you barely ever speak again, for the most part. But again, so they didn't have anything to learn from. They didn't have any positive models or experiences to go, oh, look how they're doing it. And again, I think that's just the thing where we always want our kids to do better than we did. I want my kids to do better than I have, or than we have, I should say. In fact, we as the parents have all spoken to all the kids before to say, like, when you grow older, if you have kids, you get separated, you get divorced, etc. You now know this is the way to not do things, and actually take what we've done and even improve on that, make that better. The best inventions aren't brand new, they're just evolvements of existing things. So take what we've done, make it better. Handing that gauntlet down, as it were. So but yes, I mean, and I suppose to kind of answer the wider sphere of one of the other reasons of how we kind of recognize how to do this is actually my fellow co-parenting stepdad, so the dad on the other side at the other parent house. His parents had separated and divorced, and they get on famously, and they've supported each other, and they're really good friends, and they have barbecues and all the rest of it. That was completely alien to me. That was like, whoa, how can you do that? So again, it was just looking at it and going, oh, actually, it can be done differently. There are people out there that work through their stuff and can come at it differently. So yeah, but I hadn't really witnessed that before.
Yeah, no, me either. It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. To my parents, you know, it was 1984-ish for me as well. You know, that we were in a small town in Derbyshire. I think my mum and dad were the only divorced parents around, and you know, it was a whole new thing, and it wasn't something that they'd ever sort of seen before. So they were finding their own way, in the best way possible, and you know, adore them both. But you know, wanted a slightly different way for the way we did things, and you know, adversarial. And I do think, and you know, I see your resolution badge on your screen, and you know, I know it's something we were talking about before we came on, but you know, there is the likes of resolution have pushed forward with trying to get more amicable divorces, more non-court resolution, less adversarial separations and divorces, and I think that can only be a good thing for all of this stuff as well. We're coming towards the end of our time together, but before we finish, I wanted to ask you a question about being a step parent, because that's a job randomly that I did before I was actually a parent. So I was a step parent first, but it's a tough job. How have you navigated being a step parent?
I think saying it's challenging or difficult would be a huge understatement. It is an absolute bloody minefield sometimes, but again, I suppose it's uniquely to the individual. I've always loved kids. I am a big kid, and I think for me, it was one of the things that I was always really conscious about was knowing what the boundary would be for the kids. And because I've been that kid as well, I kind of had an idea of where and how they might be feeling about things. So it's about recognizing that, okay, as a stepdad, stepfather, step-parent, knowing that my situation is very unique and different to the bio parents. But it's also about how to show my kids, or my stepchildren, bonus children as I call them, how much for bonus kids, because they are bonus. I didn't anticipate to have them, so they're extra, which is great. But it was also about how do I show them through actions, words, everything, that actually the two most important people in their world, of which I have to accept I'm not, how do I show that I respect each of those people, even when me and their dad couldn't stand each other and didn't get on. And I've told this story many times, but every time their dad would be dropping them off, and they'd come bundling through the door, I would always make a bit of a beeline, and it was about interest, not interrogation. And I think that's where people go wrong. It's like, right, where have you been? What have you done? No, can't do that, can't take that, can't do this. And then starting criticizing, or they shouldn't be doing that. And for me, it was about interest. It was about showing them that I know this person is one of two of the most important people in their world. And actually, so it'd be a case of, like, again, positively how you're delivering something and where that intent's coming from, and saying, all right, how was your weekend at Daddy's? Yeah, great. Like, what did you do? Or even little things like, if I knew he had a job interview, he changed his car or whatever, like, oh, Daddy's got a new truck, that's really cool, yeah, he likes it. But it was showing them that I know he's important to them, and that I respect that, and I'm showing an interest. It's not the Spanish Inquisition. I'm not taking notes to use against them later. But then it was also, it kind of carries on from there, but it's also about how do you support their relationship as well? Because also as a step parent, one of the other things that unfortunately I witness quite a lot is where maybe a step parent isn't necessarily supporting their stepchild's relationship with the other bio parent, because they're coming from their own place and their own opinions, their own assumptions, or maybe actual experiences. But again, that what it once was doesn't necessarily have to be forever. How do you positively support that? How do you support that relationship and help that to keep flourishing and to grow? Because ultimately it's about the only feedback you'll ever get as a co-parent, step parent, or anything, you'll only get that feedback when they're older.
Yeah, absolutely.
And sometimes in the moment.
Yeah, that's not the stuff you want.
I remember almost complete like a little movie in my head one night, this a couple of years ago, and Leonie and my stepdaughter had come downstairs. Me and her mum were in the living room watching some kind of box set of some kind of, I don't know. Leonie came in, floods of tears. She must have been about 14 maybe at the time. She came in, floods of tears. We were like, what's wrong, sweetheart? And she said, I've just been watching Marriage Story.
Oh God!
What's his name? The guy that plays Kylo Ren, Adam something or other. And she'd just been watching it upstairs in her room, and she came down in floods of tears, and she actually like threw herself around me and her mum, and she was like, "Thank you so much for always supporting and making me have that relationship." Because when her and her dad might have been at odds, it would be a lot easier if she went, "I don't want to go to Daddy today," and for us to go, "Okay, cool, then let's go. Yeah, cool, stay here. We'll send him a shitty message." Right. Actually, what she needed was support with that relationship. Okay, well, look, what's going on? Why don't you want to go? What's the problem?
Yeah.
How do we help you rectify that? How can you engage with Daddy? But also, how can we engage? I call him Daddy. Like, if the kids are there, I'll be like, "All right, Daddy," or I'll be like, "Oh, kids, Daddy's here." Right. But again, it's a mark of respect, appreciation, all that stuff, creating equality. And not trying to cause a situation where the children feel they have to choose or make that. But yeah, it's not easy. But how hard do you want to? How successful do you want this to be? How hard do you want to work at it? And anything worth creating or producing is never going to be easy. It's worth the effort. And then when you can create environments where they just free flow from in and out of the house, or like me and Dan watching like England matches together and stuff like that, Yeah, it makes the world a difference. And also now you've got these 4 children in our instance who have 4 parents.
Yeah.
They've got 4. And all 4 of us bring a unique set of skills and experience and abilities. I'm not good at science or maths. go like my ex-wife and my girlfriend are both accountants. So want maths kids, go and talk to them. Like Dan's a quiet genius. You want something scientific or something like that, go and speak to Dan. You want something creative or more emotively connected, come and talk to me. Like, but they've now got twice as much opportunity to go and get the support they need between this group of 4 parents as opposed to being restricted to 2.
Lots of boxes ticked. That's it's absolutely amazing. The word that that I was thinking when you were talking was curiosity. You know, it's about being curious about what they've been doing and where they've been going, not because they've been with the other parent, even just the way you'd ask them if they've been with a mate or they've been out somewhere else. It's and having that opportunity to talk about the other parent in the house, that it's so important. And it's something that I remember not having. You know, it's like you definitely did not mention the other parent when I lived with my mum. When I was with my mum, I didn't, you know, you don't talk about the past and you don't talk about dad. And we actively encourage like the kids to, I want their memories. I want them to be able to talk about stuff they remember us all doing together. It's not gone. It's still part of their history, and it still should be able to be talked about. And I think it's so important.
See, I also say a lot of time around, and I'm all for pronouns. It's all over my LinkedIn, etc. But I always say co-parenting is no place for pronouns, because if you're talking about the other parent, especially to your children, or even not directly to them, but you're referring to your fellow co-parent, he, him, her, she, what you're actually doing is subconsciously devaluing that parent in the child's mind. You are making them less than in a status. If you have always called them mum, mummy, dad, daddy, continue to do so, because it's about them, not about you. One of the other really important things actually recently about curiosity, it actually really, really helps your co-parenting relationship, because let's be honest, we all like to believe that our little darlings don't do anything wrong and they are the salt of the earth. But they will play you off on each other, and purposely or unintentionally, they will. And little things will come up, and little statements, little things, etc., little experiences. And if you're in a contentious, litigious, and laborious kind of challenging kind of co-parenting relationship, you take each of that as another opportunity to create a stance or a line in the sand or an attack or whatever it might be. Actually, when you get into a phase where you can collaboratively work together with your co-parent and actually challenge that stuff, like to the point where quite often, like one of the kids had said or done something about what's happened at the other house, or what they've done at the other house, or whatever it might be, or what the other parents have said, and we know they're putting some wool over the eyes, there's something not right here. It's so much easier to go, should I ring daddy, see what he said? Is that what he said? Is it really what he said? Oh, I can call him now and call in the bluff. Or even actually call and go, so-and-so said this. That is not what I said. Okay, let's put you on loudspeaker. What did you say, Dad? and then actually they get to realise, oh, right, we can't play this lot off on each other. I mean, and it's no different to if you were still together. I remember being a kid, and my dad used to do the ironing. Like me, he loved ironing. I don't know why, we're both a bit strange like that. Bless his comments.
Okay. That's for another day, that one, Tom.
Yeah, I could do a whole episode just on like me and my ironing. But I remember as a kid, I would walk into like the living room or something, and Dad would be doing the ironing, get home from school, and I'd go like, Dad, can I have a chocolate bar? But no, dinner's ready in an hour. Okay, cool. Slink off upstairs and go and see Mum in the study or wherever she was. But Mum, can I have a chocolate bar? What did Dad say? He said it's all right if you say it's all right. Oh, that's strange. Dinner's almost ready. Yeah, Dad said it's okay. Have one. Kids do that. Like they play you off on one another and for their own advantage. Like they're testing boundaries. That's their job. But your job as a parent is where you instill them and how you instill them. And if you can create an environment where you can actually go, I'm going to sanity check that with my fellow co-parent. Did this happen? No, it did not. Cool. Mum says no. And actually it helps all of you. and you know better how to better support them, and it helps them learn those boundaries as well, and also where that's mirrored at the two homes. Anyway, I could talk about this for hours.
I could talk to you for literally for hours, Tom. I know I could, and that's been such a fantastic episode, and I'm sure some of these topics we could definitely revisit again in the future. But for now, I know that our listeners and viewers can get hold of you at your email address, which is kindly behind you. Anywhere else that they can find you? So Instagram and LinkedIn, the best places?
Yeah. If you just Google Tom Nash, Mr. Divorce Coach, I guarantee you will find me somewhere.
You'll find a big yellow chair and you'll find Tom. We'll put the links in the show notes anyway, so that people can get hold of you if they want to, for anything on divorce coaching, emotional support, or talking about co-parenting, putting some of this stuff into action for yourselves. Tom, thank you so much for joining me. I've really enjoyed today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.